enjoy the show. Firstly, I will actually by name acknowledge the speakers that will be speaking this afternoon that are here on my left at the head. On that note, I might invite the Vice Chancellor to come up and make some welcome remarks.
And the entire university community, it is my very great honor this afternoon to welcome you all.
Thank you, ladies. Right, makes for much more powerful photo.
The Honourable Minister James Shaw, Minister for Climate Change from New Zealand, the New Zealand High Commissioner, the Vice Chancellor. We have other people in the audience. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, the Pro Vice Chancellor, the General Secretary or Secretary General of PIFS, and also our Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Dr. Satendra Prasad, is also a former colleague of many of you from USP, who is now, of course, our Permanent Representative to the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me much pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'll be very brief. Actually, I'm not feeling too crash hot, as they say. But I'd like to welcome the Honourable Minister to Fiji. We met for the first time and the last time in Bonn on the margins of COP23, where we had met him for the first time, of course, discussed the very exciting path that New Zealand has actually undertaken with the new New Zealand government. And we are very fortunate enough to have him here this afternoon to hear from him regarding the very ambitious targets and indeed goals that the New Zealand government has put in place to achieve by 2050. These goals, ladies and gentlemen, as we know, are critical in respect of our ability to meet the challenges of climate change. All of us in this room are actually vulnerable to climate change. Not just New Zealanders, not just Fijians, not just Pacific Islanders, but many other citizens, indeed all the citizens of the global community that we all live in. Of course, some of us actually face it more at the cold face of it. We bear the brunt of it because of the fact that we live in a particular region, or given our size and our vulnerability, both from a climatic condition, from geographical position, but also from an economic position. Because the vulnerability, of course, increases when you have small economies that do not necessarily have the resilience built into it. And that resilience is not just about your resilience as human beings, but also about resilience in your infrastructure, resilience in your economy, resilience in the various communities that you do live in. New Zealand, of course, ladies and gentlemen, has been a very keen partner and indeed a very good partner, in particular for Fiji's COP23 efforts. New Zealand has contributed generously, both financially and of course technically, in respect of some of the initiatives that have been undertaken prior to COP23 and of course during COP23 and indeed now post COP23. Recently, the New Zealand government has made an announcement of an additional New Zealand $2.5 million in funding for this year. Part of this funding will be used to build a Pacific and Agriculture Pavilion at COP24 at Katowice, as you know, in Poland, which is where COP24 will be held, which will build a space to showcase the efforts that are being made in the Pacific to build resilience to climate change, particularly in the agricultural sector. This pavilion will also provide an invaluable platform for the world's farmers and all agro-industry stakeholders to engage with an issue critical to global food security and indeed economic prosperity. New Zealand was also very much at the forefront and helped us push sometimes what may be deemed to be controversial initiatives, such as the adoption of the Coronivia Joint Work on Agriculture, that will help parties to develop and implement new strategies for adaptation and mitigation within the agricultural sector too. It also partnered with us with the launch of the Local Communities and Indigenous People platform, which is intended to give a greater voice to Indigenous peoples and local communities in the climate negotiations and allow them to share their traditional knowledge and best practices on reducing emissions, adapting to climate change, and building resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a list of all the wonderful things that New Zealand intends to do. I do not intend to steal the thunder of the Minister, because I'm sure he's going to talk to us about that. but it is very refreshing for us, indeed in the Pacific, to have a larger economy on the fringes of the Pacific Islands like New Zealand that has taken up this initiative. I'd like to thank them for it. And indeed, they would, we believe, in terms of the announcement that they have made, actually trailblaze what other countries indeed should be doing, in particular economies of their size or even larger economies than theirs. And we take a lot of comfort and solace from the fact that New Zealand has taken this lead. In Fiji, of course, we have, just to share a few things with you, we've had to be, of course, be innovative in terms of our ability to adapt to climate change in particular, because as you know that mitigation really is not that much of an issue for Fiji, although there is an element of mitigation. But many of the Pacific Island countries have very low carbon footprints. So we are more the adaptation space. So funds are actually required for adaptation purposes. And of course we do have mitigation. We have your nationally determined contributions that Fiji has actually made a commitment to reduce our carbon emissions by 30% by 2030. And we look forward to implementing such issues such as energy efficiency, using more renewable energy, and using, of course, cleaner and greener transportation. And that's one of the things that New Zealand will, of course, I'm sure, talk about, and which we want to learn from. However, ladies and gentlemen, we also need the partnership, before I finish off, of all stakeholders. Governments cannot alone do it. We had this morning, for example, the Fiji Employers and Commerce Federation that held, stemming in from the Marrakesh Partnership, where we had the private sector from the various Pacific Island countries coming together to look at issues in terms of how they can actually help reduce the carbon footprint, but not just reducing the carbon footprint, but also trying to actually put in innovation. We need to be a lot more innovative, we need to be a lot more creative in respect of occupying the space that climate change requires us to occupy if we indeed want to reduce the global rising temperatures. So innovation is very critical. We are at a university here. We look forward to the students and indeed the academia to look at ways as to how innovation can actually help us and not just be able to adapt to the changes in climate change, but also to be able to bring about innovation that will create efficiency, energy efficiency, and various other techniques and technology that will help us meet these challenges, which is actually, as our MC stated, is an existential threat. As the VC has said, many Pacific Island countries see that, and indeed it is one for all of us. So ladies and gentlemen, with those introductory remarks, I'd like to once again thank all of you for your presence here, and of course thank the Honourable Minister and his team for being here, and we look forward to hearing from him. Binaka, thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, I'd now like to invite New Zealand High Commissioner to Fiji and my boss, His Excellency Jonathan.